If there's one thing that's true about a Drag Race episode, it's that it's going to end in a lip sync. Except for a few episodes, including the most recent one, the show is always going to end with somebody winning a lip sync and somebody losing. Figuring out who those somebodies are is what the episode is all about. Welcome to Wild Spear, and today we're going to be talking about 5 times that Drag Race made a lip sync happen. Usually the individuals who are in a lip sync are the right choices. They're either the ones who did the best of the week or the worst of the week, depending on if it's All-Stars or a regular season. That doesn't always mean that those are true for each episode, though. Sometimes the producers see an opportunity to make an iconic lip sync, and that's what today's video is all about. The Drag Race producers are just that, producers of a TV show. Their goal is to make great TV, and the lip sync is a great tool for them to do just that. There are a couple of different ways that producers have forced a lip sync to happen. And what I mean by forced is that the queens who are chosen to lip sync might not be the 100% correct queens to put into that lip sync. There are a couple of reasons why producers might choose to put 2 queens together in a lip sync that don't deserve to be there. When 2 queens have a close relationship, either positive or negative, they're probably going to end up in a lip sync together sometime during the season. If the queens have a relationship with a judge, they'll probably end up in a lip sync in front of that judge. If the producers need to get rid of a lip sync assassin, a strong lip syncer might end up in the bottom with them. We'll be talking about a bunch of different scenarios for today's video about how producers are able to force a lip sync. On this channel, we usually rank things from 1 to 9, but I just want to talk about 5 cases where production made a lip sync happen. I know there are more than 5, so there might be more videos just like this one. When I first thought about doing this video, the first lip sync that I thought about was one from season 11. There was one relationship on season 11 that transcended all the other ones, at least I guess positive relationship. And that was the relationship between Brooklyn Hytes and Miss Vanjie. Never before had Drag Race had a true showmance in a way that they did with Brooklyn and Vanjie. They knew that this relationship was either going to end up with them winning a lip sync for the crown or with them lip syncing for their life. Brooke and Vanjie made it all the way to the end of the season, to the final competitive episode, the Roomix. The queens had to write and perform verses to a RuPaul song, in this case, Queens Everywhere. This is one of my favorite Roomix songs, and the queens did amazing, all 5 of them. According to the judges, the worst 2 of the week for this challenge were Miss Vanjie and Brooklyn Hytes. But was that really the true bottom 2? I think Vanjie actually had one of the best verses of the week, and the one that's the most quotable. It really represented her. The problem with her performance was that she didn't really lip sync the words. You watch her in the performance, you can see she's not even moving her mouth when her verse is happening. Maybe it's because it's so wordy, but really, Vanjie deserved to be in the bottom. Brooke, on the other hand, had a great performance and had a great verse. I think at the time, the consensus was that Silky should have been in the bottom with Vanjie, simply because her outfit really didn't work and didn't look great on camera, the same way that all the other queens had done. Brooke wasn't the best of the week, that was obviously Yvie, and A'keria did amazing too. This gave the producers enough ammunition to put Brooke into the bottom with Miss Vanjie. They knew that nobody was going to be sending Miss Vanjie home this season unless it was Brooklyn Hytes. The lip sync for this episode was A Deeper Love by Aretha Franklin, which is something that I know Vanjie could have done very well, but it seemed like her time was up and she knew it. The final product was a pretty great lip sync. Brooke and Vanjie are both some of the best lip syncers of not only that season, but Drag Race in general. The problem was it didn't end as emotionally as I think the producers had expected. Vanjie instead saw the writing on the wall and just really let that be her final performance on Drag Race until she came back for All Stars. The other closest thing that we have to a showmance was actually from Drag Race UK Series 2. And I'll be talking about Tayce and A'Whora. Unlike Brooke and Miss Vanjie, though, Tayce and A'Whora were queens who had started dating prior to the show. They weren't dating at the time that the show aired, and they were still roommates throughout the COVID break. The producers and queens themselves loved to bring up this relationship through the season, and it actually ended up being in the reading challenge for both Tayce and A'Whora. Both of these queens were two of the best performing queens of the season, so we saw a lot of them and their storyline throughout the season. And with them being so close, the judges knew that this was the perfect opportunity for them to lip sync at some point throughout the season. They just needed to find the right moment. And luckily, that opportunity finally presented itself during the Final 5 Stand-Up Comedy Challenge. The clear top two for this episode were Lawrence Chaney and Bimini, while Tayce, A'Whora, and Ellie were sort of the bottom three for the episode. If this was judged fairly, Tayce would have been saved and the bottom two would have been A'Whora and Ellie Diamond. But when the producers saw it, it didn't matter which of the top three was the worst, because the bottom two was always going to be Tayce and A'Whora. With their storyline all season, and with Lawrence and Bimini being the front runners of the season, it didn't matter who won this lip sync because the goal wasn't to crown one of those, it was to get this lip sync. The lip sync here was to You Don't Have to Say You Love Me by Dusty Springfield, and really on the nose here, producers. Okay, we knew what you were trying to do by picking this song between Tayce and A'Whora. Okay. The producers decided that Tayce was the one who was going to stay, and the rest was history. Showmances aren't the only thing that producers want to focus on for a lip sync, though. More often, the producers want queens who have conflict to end that conflict in a lip sync. This has happened numerous times across numerous Drag Race franchises, and it's probably what future videos about this topic will be all about. Oftentimes, you can tell who might be in a lip sync simply based on who's had conflict, particularly within Untucked. When RuPaul says, if you're not watching Untucked, you're only getting half the story, you are really missing out on some clues for the future plan of the season. Well, at least until season 14. Season 13's Untucked was particularly explosive. During the Untucked for the Bag Ball, Tamisha Iman and Kandy Muse gave producers the rivalry that they were looking for to drive these two contenders' storylines. Tamisha is a queen that has a lot of history and has been in the drag scene for a long time. Kandy Muse hadn't been in the drag scene quite as long as Tamisha, and they butted heads for that very reason. I just know when the producers were watching this happen, they were calculating in their mind when they could force these two to end up in the bottom. With both Kandy and Tamisha not being the greatest performers throughout the season, they knew that opportunity was coming up quick. And it didn't take long because the next challenge, the Discomentary Challenge, was the producers' opportunity to do that. For the Discomentary Challenge, the queens had to dance and perform for different scenes of the disco scene in the 1970s. Kandy was one of the queens who clearly struggled in the challenge, but Tamisha, who is a trained dancer, was one of the best of the week. It's been widely reported that Tamisha, who was fighting cancer at the time, did the entire dance routine with an ostomy bag, but still managed to hit all of her marks. The same couldn't be said, though, for production favorite Gottmik. She really struggled, and you could even see when the producers tried to hide her missteps throughout the challenge. Kandy was in the group with Gottmik, and both of them struggled to outshine Tina Burner, who really killed it in this episode and doesn't get enough credit. The bottom three of the week should have been Kandy, Gottmik, and Utica, but unfortunately, Tamisha took Gottmik's spot in that bottom three. The producers knew that they could put Tamisha into the bottom and have Kandy and her go at it for that final lip sync. The lip sync for this episode was Hit 'Em Up Style by Blue Chantrell, which, great lip sync song, but for a disco challenge, we pick Blue Chantrell? this is a great opportunity to have I Feel Love or Hot Stuff or even like Night Fever. But instead we get Hit 'em Up Style, which is exactly in Kandi's wheelhouse. Tamisha, I think, did amazing in this lip sync and really could have been the winner if the producers decided that was the case. In this case, this lip sync really robbed the season of having a rivalry that could have extended multiple episodes. I think that Tamisha was, at least for me at the time, my favorite queen going into the season, and I was really excited to see what she could do throughout this season, especially with Drag Race not casting very many old school drag queens. Unfortunately, the producers decided that they wanted to resolve that conflict then and there and decided to go with Kandi for the rest of the season. Kandi did give us great TV throughout the rest of the season, and she made it all the way to the top 2, whereas Tamisha has gone on to do her own thing post Drag Race. And like I mentioned before, these types of conflicts on Drag Race are usually the ones that end up with a lip sync. But what about sort of one-sided rivalries? This is probably the most famous one-sided rivalry in Drag Race, and it's actually a lip sync that happened twice. I'm talking about Darienne Lake and BenDeLaCreme on season 6 of Drag Race. BenDeLaCreme was one of the best performing queens on season 6, but that didn't come without a few detractors. Darienne Lake, in particular, wasn't a fan of Dela the majority of the competition. It was something to do with her drag persona or her confidence, but Darienne was not feeling Dela's crap. For the 5th episode of season 6, the queens had to come together to create an advertisement for one of RuPaul's makeup lines. Dela and Darienne were maybe the worst of the week. I'm not sure if they were. I think it probably should have been Courtney and Jocelyn in that bottom 2 for the week. But the producers knew when they initially paired up Dela and Darienne that this would end with either them resolving their differences and coming together and winning the challenge, or with them ending up in the bottom 2. And I really thought when they were paired together that they would do great. Darienne's funny, Dela's funny, they really could have had some fun ideas. But unfortunately, they had conflict between the two and the producers decided a lip sync was going to come. And I don't want to speak for the producers, but I guess I am, because that's what this whole video is all about. But I think they didn't expect Darienne to do as well as she did during this lip sync. Darienne's performance here to Point of No Return was one of the best performances in Drag Race history. I don't care, I'm gonna say it. Darienne deserves her flowers for this performance. I don't think the producers expected her to do as amazing as she did, and that's why they saved Darienne first, but they also saved Dela to continue on throughout the season. Producers knew that Darienne and Dela's story was not over after this episode, and they had another opportunity to do just that 3 weeks later during the ball for the season. For season 6's ball, we had the glitter ball, where the queens had to create looks using shiny materials. In the early seasons, we often forget that the ball was at the end of the season, so we only had 5 queens left. The win in this case was given to Adore Delano, who did fine in the challenge, but I really think Courtney Act probably was the best of the week and deserved the win, but that's just me. Darienne clearly deserved to be in the bottom for her look, it just wasn't flattering for her, but Dela had an amazing final look. I think when you put it together with her other looks throughout the ball, she kind of missed the mark on the first 2 categories, but her final look was great. I'm not sure I would have put Ben in the bottom. I probably would have put Adore in the bottom here with Darienne, but the producers were not going to send home Bianca. They were not going to send home Adore, and they probably weren't going to send home Courtney. It had to come down to these final 2. And that worked for the producers' storyline because they could finally resolve the conflict from the entire season with one final lip sync. Would Dela redeem herself against Darienne, or would she be sent packing? I think this lip sync to Kelly Clarkson's Stronger was a lot closer than the first lip sync, but Darienne just edged her out, and Dela was sent home at 5th place. We've talked about showmances, we've talked about conflict, But there are other cases where the producers might make a lip sync happen, even if you don't think about it. The final example I'm going to be talking about is unlike any of the others that I had spoken about before. Like I said at the start of this video, Drag Race just wants to create an iconic moment, and they'll do that whichever way they can with whatever material that they have. For this final example, I'm going to be talking about when the runway decided the bottom two. And I know what you're thinking, the runway hasn't mattered in years unless it's a design challenge. And while that may be true, and Bob did win wearing the Amazon robot costume, on season 14, the runway determined why one queen was in the bottom two. And that queen was Kerri Colby. On the 4th episode of season 14, the queens had to perform in the Super Tease challenge. For this challenge, the queens had to create fake promo advertisements for the current season of Drag Race. And of the last couple of seasons, I think this is one of the best new Drag Race challenges that they've come up with. I would probably put it in the same league as season 5's Lip Sync to Iconic Untucked Moments challenge. Most of the queens did pretty well during this challenge, but one queen really didn't do so well, and that was Alyssa Hunter, who ended up in the bottom two. The other queen who likely should have been in the bottom two was Jorgeous, who had most of her worst moments hidden from the final product. Instead, though, we had Kerri Colby as the other spot in the bottom two. Kerri was nervous in the challenge, but in the final product, she ended up doing pretty well and probably deserved a safe placement. Talking about the runway now, this episode was the night of 1,000 JLos, and Kerri Colby wore probably the most iconic JLo look of all time. This was the green Versace dress that she wore to the Grammys in the year 2000. The deep plunging neckline was scandalous at the time to the point that it now has a Wikipedia page all for itself. When are we going to get a Wikipedia page for Reba's red dress? Kerri is one of the most connected queens in Drag Race history. She's friends with a lot of famous designers and other celebrities. The dress that she wore was the actual dress that JLo wore. Well, not the exact same dress as the one she wore in 2000, but one that she wore for a recreation in 2014. It still was the same green Versace dress, and it was once worn by JLo. In a night of 1,000 JLos, Kerri wore a dress that was actually worn by JLo, and an iconic dress at that. Instead of putting Jorgeous and Cornbread, who are more deserving of the bottom placement this week, the producers wanted to have the iconic moment of having Kerri lip sync in the most iconic dress of JLo's career. The queens performed To Play, which is probably not one of my favorite JLo songs. I would have enjoyed something like On the Floor or Jenny from the Block, but anyway, we got a fun, dancey JLo song. And Kerri did okay. She is not a bad lip syncer by any means, but it seemed like she was more worried about ruining the dress, which probably was very expensive during the lip sync, rather than trying to really win. I don't think she belonged in that bottom two to begin with, but she was awarded the win over Alyssa Hunter. They tried to use sort of the money gun fail that Alyssa had as justification, but still Kerri could not out lip sync Alyssa. There are many other times that the producers and the judges have forced a lip sync to happen for storyline reasons, but these were just the first 5 that I could think of. Stay tuned for more videos with this topic coming up in the future, and drop your favorite forced lip sync in the comments as well. Also, just watch out for more content here on Wild Spear.